Hi everyone, happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. My name is Sahndra from Dufe, editor-in-chief for the Black Film Wire, and we just finished working on our Martin Luther King Jr. piece, and we put it out. But I just wanted to make a little bit of commentary for those of you who, like to listen as opposed to just reading. Our piece today kind of focuses on, of course, the legendary Martin Luther King Jr., who has been played over time by multiple actors. And for us, it was important that we provide a list of films that showcased his story from different angles for people that wanted to watch to understand better or understand the civil rights movement that had happened in the United States. So what we did do was also focus on the women in his life and the women that helped to amplify that movement, the ones that were strategic, the ones that, spoke for the movement and things like that. And that's kind of how this conversation is going to go. So let's start from the first place. First, we kind of take a look at some of the women that are important to highlight. When we're speaking about Martin Luther King, one of them would be his wife, Coretta Scott King. In one line that we said here, I'm just going to read it out. We said that Coretta was not simply the wife of, she was a political mind, a moral compass, and later on the chief steward of Dr. King's legacy. I think it's something important to know for those of you who don't really know what role she played. We also have this lady who is really quite fascinating, Diane Nash. She's this fierce and an unyielding, coordinated person who, had this iconic quote where she said, "Strong people don't need strong leaders." Really interesting. She was a very strategic mind, when you think about the civil movement, the civil rights movement back in the day. One line that we have here is like, these women didn't just support the movement, they engineered its survival. And I think it's really important that as we're studying these topics and looking more into them, we understand the role that women played during this time. Now, down to the list of some films that you can watch. So, what we tried to do was to make sure that you have options, depending on what streaming platforms you have access to, that you will still be able to watch, this movie, a story about Martin Luther King Jr. And what we also did was to explain to you the different angles that some of these storytellers took. So it's easy for you to have an understanding of what you want to start with and focus on. At least in America, it's a public holiday today. In the rest of the world, it's not. But if you still have time this weekend, we do urge you to find some time and watch this. So of course we have Selma. Everyone knows Selma. David Oyelowo is Martin Luther King Jr. This is a very iconic movie. Oprah is in it, and I was just singing the song that Common had, Glory. This Common and Common raps in. I was just singing that song like much earlier today. Now the war isn't over, victory isn't won. I love that song. It's really, really beautiful. So watch that on Amazon Prime if you have Prime Video. It's of course directed by the iconic Ava DuVernay. So what this one really focuses on is, so what Selma really focuses on is Selma. Obviously the voting rights campaign that was done and the role that the women played, with it next to Martin Luther King. It's quite an emotional movie. It has all the big names, Oprah, everyone is in it. You can check that out, and it's on Amazon Prime. Another angle to the story about Martin Luther King is one called Genius. This one, on the one hand, shows you Martin Luther King and then shows you Malcolm X. And Martin Luther King is played by Kevin Harrison Jr., fantastic actor. And Malcolm X is played by Aaron Pierre, his Mufasa. I can't believe I'm making that kind of joke on this kind of serious topic. But this one is a version that was done by National Geographic Channel. And why I like it is the fact that, like, most times when people talk about X and King, they try to like set them in some kind of rivalry. But this version really juxtaposes them and shows them side by side and doesn't make them as one was better or worse, but as two necessary forces that were needed to kind of propel the Black people in America forward during the civil rights movement. So I think this version is also quite interesting as well. Another one that I like is one that is on Netflix. It's called Rustin. I like to call it Rustin. And it stars Emil Amin, who is actually a friend of mine in real life. So I'm rooting really very much for this film. When I saw it, I was very proud of him. And you guys should go watch it as well. And what is so fascinating is that this version adds another angle to it. Around most of these great people we see, it is always the strategy part, right? People that are working with them, thinking from the back end, and we don't always get to know these people. For most Americans, you know them, but international people that are watching, you may not have heard of Bayard Rustin.
who is the guy, the architect behind what Martin Luther King does. And that role is played by Coleman Domingo, who funny enough, is in both this version and the version that has David Oyelowo. So watch both of them. This one is on, currently you can see that on Netflix. So if you have Netflix, most people have Netflix, you can check that out and you can watch it. Another one that you can see is this one I really like, Montgomery to Memphis. And this one is voiced by the legendary James Earl Jones. What is different about this? It's historic. It has the actual footage, archival footage of Martin Luther King in it. And it just has this really, really epic voice, like speaking in the background and telling you what's happening. Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. If you want to look at things from the surveillance side, which is a little bit, wow, interesting to find out. Most of us know this, but, obviously we know historically that the FBI used to heavily survey most of these movements, including when Martin Luther King was still alive. You get to watch this version of the story, which is called MLK FBI. And what is very fascinating is you get to see the women that endured and stood by him. Also, another version is Eyes on the Prize. This one is on PBS. It shows you more of the people powered focus of the story, which I also love because for a minute there, detaches the attention just from the Reverend and kind of brings it out to the movement, which you can see. The other one that PBS also has is called Freedom Riders. So there are a lot of these films. I just gave you guys a few ones that I think, check them out. It could be today, sometime during the weekend, just see, so you can get to learn about this iconic man and the movement that he stood for from different angles. Now, before I leave, I do want to say something. For most of us that are film people, watch a lot of movies, film buffs, we're quite familiar with the different genres of films. But for the everyday person that is watching, you may not necessarily know how you call these kind of films that I just showed you. I showed you quite a few of them, right? So these kind of films are called social justice films. Social justice films are important. For most of us, we know the comedies, that's the ha-has, right? You want to go laugh, just watch this thing. You have a lot of stress from work, you want to watch a funny thing, you watch a stand-up comedy. Most of us are familiar with that. Most of us are familiar with romantic comedies, right? Fall in love for a minute there. And most of us may not be familiar with the true word that you used to call films like this. And like I said, it's social justice films. And I do have to speak about why these films are important and to encourage other filmmakers to get in the habit of also saying, telling stories like this. One of the biggest reasons why social justice films are important is the fact that film has a very special way of like going into things that memory might have forgotten, right? Some of us, most of us, we're not even there at that time, but we get to, through the lens of the character, really empathize and feel what these people were feeling in that difficult moment, victorious moment, the different moments that are chronicled throughout the respective films rather. So film has the ability to activate that empathy. And this is especially important for younger generations of people who are encountering these stories, not just from textbooks, but from the agency of film where they can see. And keep in mind that, like, for the most part, if you look at consumer, reports for most people that create content, you will see that the attention span of most people have really shortened now to like short form content. So film, again, is just a better way to portray that, or not even necessarily better, a good supplement, something to add to what you're already reading, to learn more about this and to preserve these. When it's done with care, like some of these films that I just mentioned to you, film becomes both an archive, it becomes a mirror, it's preserving truth while asking us, the audience, what to do with it. So at the Black Film Wire, we are definitely honoring Dr. King, especially the women and the strategists that work with him to make these moments immortalized forever, which we're, celebrating today. And here's a line that we wrote that I do want to read. We said that today we honor Dr. King not by shrinking his story to one man, but by widening it and naming the women that stood beside him, and sometimes in front of him holding the line. This is really important. And Martin Luther King, of course, he had a dream, but dreams do not get people to the line. Dreams don't march themselves through lines across bridges, but they have a way of being carried, being protected, being negotiated, and paid for by sleepless nights, which are unmarked sacrifices for the most part. A lot of these people may not ever know their names, but we celebrate all of them. These are guys that did things that are harder to do than we think. So we celebrate you, Dr. Martin Luther King. and we celebrate all of us. And just one last thing before I get off the call, the conversation, is just a call for us in the diaspora to connect ourselves and stop looking at ourselves just as one people bound by country borders and currencies, but to look beyond at our shared Black experience across the Caribbean, across Africa, here in the United States, and find ways. Martin Luther King saw a sector he was good at, the ability to speak to people and move social justice forward. Find what you're good at and be a voice at it. Let your life mean something bigger than who you are. So I hope that was helpful. I hope you guys get to watch these movies and fall in love with them as much as we have. That's Sahndra from Dufe from the Black from Wire, and have a fantastic rest of your day, everyone. God bless you. Bye.